Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics. I want to get right into our feature interview this week. We're joined by a very special guest that we've been looking to have on for a long time now, and we're glad to have him, Lieutenant Governor Peter Kinder. Governor Kinder, welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
This campaign, as somebody that is a Southeast Missourian that's been in the media and observed you in staff positions, you seem to be enjoying this campaign. How's it going?
Well, the perception is accurate. I am enjoying it. And you know, in this business, there's a lot of travel, a lot of long hours, a lot of 18-hour days. You got to mix in some fun. And in my first 6 months at it, since the July 12th announcement, I have had a lot of fun. I happen to believe that a campaign for governor ought to be about great subjects. It ought to be about a great cause. I'd like to help make Missouri great again. I don't want it to be about the politics of personal destruction, petty, vicious personal attacks, and getting a bucket of slime to dump it on your opponent's head. I think the voters of Missouri want to hear the candidates lay facts and fair argument on the table and let the people decide. And that's what I'm trying to do in this campaign, and I'm having a ball.
Fundraising was a successful quarter, right? I mean, you had to feel good about the number you posted.
Yes. We do feel good about it. The largest number of contributors inside Missouri, the largest number of contributors $5,000 and under. I don't have a bi-coastal network of billionaires who are funding my campaign from outside Missouri. Overwhelmingly, our support is from inside Missouri, with just a few exceptions, and I'm gratified by that. Now, it's a long, hard slog, and I've got a long way to go, but we're hitting our marks to this point.
The general consensus is you're the front runner. Do you feel that way?
Well, I'm in a field of 4 candidates. I'm the only one not from St. Louis. I'm also the only one who has ever won a statewide election among the 4 candidates. And I've won 3 times. I've come from behind all 3 times, and I've won when I've been outspent. So if other handicappers want to say I'm the front runner, they can do that. I think I don't count any result until the election day.
You know, just being a hillbilly from West Butler County, kind of on the other side of SEMO, I've come to love St. Louis, and I'm very familiar with where you're from in Cape Girardeau. You've been somebody that's known in the Republican Party for being able to reach out and connect with St. Louis and get votes from St. Louis. Recently, they took a punch in the gut from Stan Kroenke. It appears as though the NFL just blatantly lied, and they were going to leave. And out the door, Kroenke kicked St. Louis pretty hard. What was your reaction?
Well, first of all, I think Kroenke, as soon as he got the team in 2010, was preparing to leave.
Seems that way.
It may even have been set up when the lease provision was signed back in the early 90s that said that this stadium would be kept in the top 10% of stadiums in the nation. That was something that cast the die, I think, 20 years ago, that this team would not stay forever in St. Louis and is now going back to California. It was definitely a punch to the gut. Right now, Mayor Slay says we're done with the NFL. I hope that changes sometime down the road. I'd like to be a part of an effort to bring back an NFL team. But I don't think any of us can ignore the elements of truth in Stan Kroenke's indictment of the St. Louis region. And I say that as one, as you acknowledged, who loves St. Louis, who's St. Louis oriented, if you will, a booster, a champion of St. Louis. And how can you not be running statewide in our state with 40% of our state's population and 50% of our state's economic activity and therefore taxes generated here? And I said this morning on a radio interview in Joplin. A long way from St. Louis, but we're all in this together, and we can't have a healthy Missouri economy if the St. Louis economy regionally is the sick man. And too often that has been the case. We used to have 5 auto assembly plants here not that long ago. Today we have 1.
Well, doesn't stand to reason. You can't build roads, and I got friends and neighbors back at the farm in Poplar Bluff that won't like it, but you can't build roads in Poplar Bluff without a healthy St. Louis economy.
You can't have a thriving Missouri economy without.
If we go back, I was at the Baseball Writers Dinner last weekend. The DeWitt family was honored with the Red Shandy's Medal. There was a standing ovation that it might still be going on if Mr. DeWitt didn't stand up and ask folks to sit down. If you do get another NFL team, isn't it important you get an owner with the integrity they've almost reached a reverent status of the DeWitt family to shepherd that team and be the ambassador for the city.
Who could imagine better stewards
Sure.
of the resources entrusted to them than Bill DeWitt and the ownership group he called together and pulled together?
So every Republican knows you. You've been in these fights for decades now. Everybody knows you're pro-life. Everybody knows your record on the Second Amendment. If you're governor of Missouri, can you look at people and say, we're going to cut taxes? Can you tell bureaucrats, I'm sorry, your service is no longer needed? Will Missourians pay lower taxes if you're elected governor?
I believe they will. First of all, the legislature has already enacted a tax cut over this governor's veto.
Very timid tax cut.
A very timid tax cut. I believe it's a first step. It was the first one in 100 years. So, look, we're surrounded by tax-cutting states. Even the newly elected now year in office governor of Illinois, Governor Rauner, is cutting taxes over there. He cut back the proposed the increase that was in place back to where it was before he took office. And Missouri cannot be surrounded by tax-cutting states and fail to take notice of that. We've got to join in those who are doing tax rate reduction. Our income tax is too high at 6%, and it kicks in at too low an income level. It was designed maybe in the 30s, maybe it was okay then. It's not okay for the 21st century. I would be looking to do what some of these other states are doing, Arkansas, Oklahoma, to name two.
So I guess back to my question, if Missourians elect you governor, will they pay less in taxes?
Yes.
And will there be less government?
There will be less government. And with the legislature's prodding, Governor Nixon took credit 2 nights ago in his State of the State message for there being 5,000 and some fewer employees in state government than there are today. I think we can do more of that. I think there are areas we could privatize.
Do you think there's someone out there thinking, oh my God, I just don't get enough services from state government right now. I miss those 5,000 people. I guarantee you there's no business owners thinking that.
Correct.
Speaking of the legislature, they've made a big thing this session of passing ethics reforms. And I guess ethics is in the eye of the beholder. Obviously, the speaker was on our show and acknowledged there may be some discontent amongst some members. He thought it was the right thing to do. Your observation, has it been good?
Well, I applaud the leadership of Todd Richardson, our speaker. He's moved those ethics bills faster than any leader I've ever seen. He had them voting out of the House. They were through committee and voting out of the House in the first 8 days after the January 6th start. I've never seen any bill come out faster than that. The bill is in the Senate. The Senate pledges swift early action on it. I believe the governor is going to get that bill on his desk soon in this legislative session, and I believe it will be in a form that he can sign. And that will begin the necessary restoration of confidence of the people.
The bill Speaker Richardson's passed thus far, if you were governor, would you sign them?
Yes.
Kind of wrapping up, you referenced a bi-coastal fundraising effort. Give us a rundown on Eric Greitens. Let's walk through your opponents real quick.
Well, he's a extraordinarily talented guy. He has a tremendous resume, and he's a friend of mine, and I wish him well.
What about John Brunner?
John Brunner and I are close friends. I supported him in his Senate run in 2012. More power to him.
And lastly, somebody you know very well. You helped lead the Republican majorities in the legislature with, Catherine Hanaway.
Catherine Hanaway is a person of high integrity, a friend. I admire her and her family, adopting that young boy from the Ukraine. Tremendous lady. The issue with these candidates is none has ever won a statewide election. If Republicans want to win the governor's mansion again, we've got to go with someone who has proven he can get to a majority statewide. Still carry 109 counties of 114, but also come into the St. Louis region and get some minority votes. And that proves to be an unbeatable combination.
Lieutenant Governor Kidner, thank you so much for coming on. We look forward to having you on and discussing this very lively race as the election season unfolds.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with our Opinion Maker panel, but first we'll leave you with this week's leading Missouri economic indicators.
All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, the heart of Missouri.
For more than a century, the St. Louis Carpenters Union has shaped our communities. Through trusted alliances, we deliver skilled professional craftspeople while our business partners provide the kind of quality jobs that keep our economy humming. It's a blueprint that has worked since 1882. Turning Missouri into a right-to-work state stalls progress, wipes out jobs, and kills momentum. Right to work is wrong for everyone. Let's keep Missouri moving forward. Visit carpdc.org to learn more.
Welcome back to This Week in Missouri Politics. We're joined by now our opinion maker panel, starting with Linda Rollo. Good to have you back on.
Great to be here.
For the second time?
Yeah.
Angela Bingaman, Public Eye, right?
Yep.
Shout out to Richard.
Hi, Richard.
James Harris, longtime Republican operative, knows our first guest very well. Good to have you back.
Good to be here. Thank you.
And for the first time, Justin Offerman, representative from Franklin County, Missouri. Good to have you on, and want to start with you on voter ID.
Sure.
Bill you sponsored. What does this voter ID bill that maybe the other ones didn't do, and why is it needed?
So the bill that I sponsored was House Bill 1631. It is the statutory enabling language to allow for the mechanics of how voter ID will be administered in the state of Missouri. It's different in a key point from other years in that we pay, and I say we, the state of Missouri pays 100% of the cost of obtaining a license or a Missouri ID, either that being a driver's license or a non-driver's license, pays for 100% of that cost and also pays for 100% of the source documentation, say a birth certificate, in order to obtain that ID. Previous versions of the bill did not have that. We had it in last year, and we made sure that we included it this year so that that undue burden is not on the individual and it's on the state.
James, it seems like there's a trade-off here between there's some folks that will forget to bring their license and get turned away against some folks that are probably voting that shouldn't. It looks like the legislature comes down on the side of making sure those folks that shouldn't vote don't vote.
Absolutely. Well, to be a productive member of society, you have to have a driver's license or a photo ID. So this is a good thing that will help. If you go around the world, almost every other country requires a photo ID to vote, just to make sure people are who they claim to be. So it's a common sense thing. I think people politically on the Democratic side have made it a partisan issue, but it's really not. It's lifting people up, helping them to have identification.
You know, Angela, my assumption is you're not a fan.
Not really.
So, but I guess the question is, to go buy a beer at Helen Fitzgerald's in Kirkwood, you got to have an ID.
That's
Is
true.
it too much to ask to have an ID to vote, which would theoretically be a more important decision?
I think that there's two issues here. It's having an ID and using the ID to vote. I think that the legislation, if you want all the citizens of Missouri to have an ID to, go buy a beer, to board a plane, or things like that, don't attach it to a voting rights bill because that's going to scream, disenfranchisement, even if that is not the intention. I do think that there is an issue of how is this going to be paid for by the state. I think that's an appropriation, and then whoever,
My God, some of those incredibly high taxes they have on people who pays for it.
Right. So I think that the issue is, let's try to detach this from a voting issue. I think there are, 220,000 people that do not have an ID, but let's get an ID, but don't attach it to a voting bill.
Well, I think maybe this may be the most sensible proposal, to give people a free ID, if you're going to demand one, but then make you have to have it to vote, right? I mean, that seems to be going the direction they're in. What's fair is fair. If you're going to demand the ID, the state should give you one.
I guess I'm just more skeptical of why we're even doing this. Are there a lot of cases of voter impersonation that are out there? And I don't ever hear that in the news. So what problem are we trying to solve here?
James, is this more about politics than actual issues?
No, I think the foundation of any democracy is having faith in your voting process and making sure people are who they claim to be.
And some elections have...
And some have been very close. And we've got thousands of illegal aliens that are, because of motor voter, are on the voter file, even though they're not supposed to be. By accident, someone has said, hey, do you want to register to vote? They get, they're registered. So why not? It's 2016. People should have to have an ID to be a productive citizen or thrive.
Angela, if we're just not going to have a southern border, doesn't that mean you need to have some kind of an ID?
Right. And like I said, I agree that I think the citizens of Missouri should have IDs. Just don't attach it to a voting bill.
Do you think, at the end of the day, is this a bill because maybe Democrats won't be as conscious of remembering their IDs as Republicans come Election Day?
Well, I do think there are, some ulterior motives, but we'll see. Let's try to take these two issues as two separate issues and go from there. So I think there are 17 cases of voter fraud since 2000, so I don't really know if that's really the intention.
Former Senator McCann had a neat point. If the real ID thing is real and the federal government won't recognize IDs, and if you have to have an ID to vote in a federal election,
right.
Can you vote?
I don't know. So
Jeff County logic, but it may be right.
Hey, it might be right.
James, the Senate is... They thought maybe the ethics bills would be controversial. Those seem to be moving very quickly. This week, the Senate was tied up in something called an expert witness bill. A lot of our viewers may have to be deep in the weeds to know what that is. Can you break that down?
Sure. I would say this week the expert witness bill is to raise the standard in lawsuits to make sure that people who claim to be an expert are. And so, just an example, you and I could not claim to be experts on women's issues because we're married or we know women, or let's say a law enforcement officer, just because someone's been a state trooper for 10 or 20 years does not make them an expert on a crime scene reconstruction, something that takes special training. Because people who go into courtrooms often can mislead juries if they're claiming to be an expert. So it's just to help reduce frivolous lawsuits is kind of the big picture thing. Make sure people are, if they claim to be an expert, they actually are. I think it's a big win for Senate Republicans. This bill was kind of filibustered last year because, whether it was Kurt Schaefer, Senate Democrats, and I think it's a big win for the bill sponsors and just for the Senate to begin moving on lawsuit reform.
What's the other side of this, Angela?
I think the issue is, we need to point out that the Missouri Association of Trial Attorneys opposed this bill, and that is the industry in which this would be enacted. That it will raise the costs of courts. And I think that, anyone will agree that getting through a trial and a jury and the entire process is, as long, it's a pretty drawn out process as it is. I think finding, these now quote unquote experts is going to raise the cost. Most attorneys bill by hour, and they're, they are the ones who have to go find the expert and then, go through all these regulations. So if we want to get, the citizens of Missouri through the legal system as quickly as they can, and take the money out of the lawyers' pockets, I think that this issue is, there's two ways to look at it.
There were some points brought up by Senator Schaaf about why change this right now, why make a government judge the person that decides, not a jury. It looked like more and more you'd see, instead of seeing somebody testify that might have some practical experience. You'd have to have some type of university professor, be published. Do you really want Melissa Click being advertised as an expert? I mean, I don't know, in today's time, you'd even want a University of Missouri professor cleaning out a barn, much less being an expert.
Well, I don't think you should point to that, but what I do think, there's nothing wrong with raising the bar a little bit. And a generalist is not an expert, and adding a few more notches that they have to check off to be qualified as a quote expert, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, these are big cases, and this is a lot of information, and juries should know that when they're talking or listening to testimony from an expert, that person really knows what they're talking about.
Representative, I'm really only an expert on being a West Butler County hillbilly and the St. Louis Cardinals. But do you really want some government judge deciding who's an expert, or you just want juries to kind of trust their horse sense to sift through and see who they think is expert and who they don't put credibility in?
Well, I would say that we have a system right now that is definitely in the minority of states in the country. We have over 40 states that have moved to this system, and the federal government also, federal court system also has this. So we are in the on the minority of 10 states that currently have the system that we have. I am not an expert. I don't claim to be an expert on almost anything, but I know that there are people who are testifying. They are saying that they are experts in a field that have no background knowledge or very little background knowledge, and we don't want those people to be claiming that they are experts and be swaying juries just because they have that expert tag. If they are an expert in the field, they should have to be qualified. Well, I think that's the tenets of the bill. And
what makes somebody an expert that's from not an expert?
Well, I'd say actual professional training in the area that they're giving testimony on. But big picture is Missouri, in every legal criteria, we're in the bottom tier. And it's probably why the American Tort Reform Association has said we're listed as a judicial hellhole. And that matters to business people, farmers,
sure,
because more lawsuits take money out of people's pockets and drives businesses away.
Go to Senator Schaaf's point. He brought up a series of property rights issues, that this would make it easier for the government to take people's property. I think that strikes people as anything to make it easier for the government to do almost anything cannot be good. Are those legitimate concerns? Is there a way to mitigate that as the bill moves through the process?
I guess the legislature will have to decide. I would say, trial attorneys, and Senator Schaaf obviously is not, but they'll always come up with a needle in a haystack as a reason. I would say those are probably not valid concerns.
Representative, you think this bill becomes law?
I think this bill does become law this year. I think that tort reform in general has been something that the Republican legislator has been pushing for years, and I think this is a good opportunity.
You consider this tort reform?
I do consider this tort reform, and I think that this definitely has a great opportunity of passing, and I look forward to casting my yes vote whenever it comes to the floor.
Angela, it was very interesting to see Scott Sifton. I would not want to debate Senator Sifton on anything, but he said, someone brought up, this is how Washington does it, and all these other states. He's like, I thought we didn't want to be New York and California and Washington. Right. And I remember thinking, there was a long pause on the Senate floor. I'm sure someone was thinking, I hate debating Senator Sifton.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it.
When did this become law?
I would say no.
On to another interesting topic. I would say if Peter Kinder's governor, this becomes law, because it definitely has the votes to be signed into law. What did you think of the interview, and tell me your take on the primary?
I love this primary. I mean, this is probably the most...
Isn't it fun?
It's great, and I think that, it's going to come down to like game theory, because you've got two well-funded candidates that are going to try to duke each other out, and they're going to be fighting. And over on this corner, you're going to have two seasoned Missouri, folks that have won in Missouri and really have the experience that are going to kind of be doing their thing. And I think that it's going to come down to resiliency and knowing how to win. And my money's on Peter Kinder.
James Harris, you've watched a bunch of these. How does this break down? And was it interesting that Greitens came out attacking Kinder?
No, because Peter Kinder's the front runner. And the one thing people forget about Peter Kinder is he's a winner. And he's always had tough races, whether it was the former First Lady of Missouri, two Democrat statewide officials, or he went through arguably the most bruising primary election in the last 20 years against a very credible, strong candidate, and he won. And so he's a proven winner.
Representative Offerman, I'm sure everybody's talking to you. You stay pretty plugged in. How did you size up the Lieutenant Governor's remarks today, and what do you think of the primary?
I'm fearful of the primary that we have for our governor's race right now. And just the fact that I'm fearful that we are going to get combative like we always do. The Missouri Republicans have a history of turning, even though they say that they won't, of turning on each other. And by the time we get out of the primary, we are bruised up pretty badly. Chris Koster is the only Democrat who is going to be running, or the only main candidate that's going to be running on the Democratic side. So we need to make sure that after the primary season, we have a unified front, and that whoever the winner is, we can make sure that we can put up a viable candidate against Chris Koster.
Angela Bingham and the representative mentioned his name. Chris Koster would be a tough person to run against. He is already spending a lot of his time a long way from I-70. You put all 5 candidates on a farm, I'm not sure he doesn't fit in better than anybody else.
Right.
Who do you want to run against?
I think that Koster is brilliant. He was a Republican, now he's a Democrat, and he's cleared the field. You're going to want the weakest candidate to run against him, but at the same time, as Linda was saying, we've got these 2 very well-funded candidates kind of going at each other in a race for second. And, Peter Kinder, I believe, will win the nomination, but maybe one of the more well-funded ones we'd want, because I think Koster would trounce them.
James, you were part of the last campaign that actually won as a Republican for governor. How do you beat Chris Koster?
I think it's issues like tort reform, right to work that kind of energize the Republican base, and then projecting a message. And Republicans, you have to go into outstate Missouri and beat Chris Koster on friendly turf to elevate the vote. And I would say probably Catherine Hanaway and Peter Kinder are the only 2 Republicans that can do that.
Is Chris Koster's biggest concern Barack Obama's shadow and a liberal poor candidate at the top of the ticket for the Democrats?
I think so, and a unified Republican Party.
How many times, Representative, do you think you'll say the name Barack Obama next fall?
Well, I think the policies that he's had over the past 8 years, we were feeling the effects of those today. So I think it's extremely relevant that we bring that up during the campaign season. Absolutely.
He's done a lot to separate himself from the president and some of the more unpopular things, especially
and Hillary
in Missouri.
Clinton or Bernie Sanders.
Do you think he's done enough, though?
It's going to be hard for him to overcome the parallels. I mean, I don't think that Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders will carry the state of Missouri, and so if Chris Koster expects to win, he's going to have to beat a good Republican candidate, and B, overcome the drag down from Hillary and Bernie.
Angela, does he distance himself enough from Obama to win in Missouri?
I think that he does. I think that he has a definitely more conservative, moderate background than Barack Obama, and I think his
Well, that's
chances...
not a hard thing to do. I mean, Vladimir Lenin might make the same claim.
Well,
Well, with our Vladimir Lenin reference, we'll leave that for this time on This Week in Missouri Politics, and we'll see you next week. This Week in Missouri Politics, brought to you in part by Sterling Bank.